I still taste the copper in my mouth sometimes. The memory of that day never leaves me, standing in mission control as the screens flickered with the first transmission from Europa Omega, our satellite orbiting what we thought was just another icy exoplanet. Dr. Reeves collapsed first, blood streaming from his nose as the images flooded in. Then Hoffman started screaming, clawing at his eyes. I remember the sound of skulls cracking against control panels, the smell of burning circuits, and the horrible silence that followed. I should have died with them. I'm Thomas Walker. 6 months ago, I was just another astrophysicist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. Now I'm the only surviving member of the Europa Omega First Contact Protocol team. The others are gone, officially listed as victims of a gas leak. That's the story they're telling anyway. The truth? We found something on that frozen world 40 light years away. Something that had been hidden for over 3 centuries. A colony, not ours. When the initial data came back, we couldn't believe it. Structures under the ice. Undeniable evidence of intelligence. The entire facility went into lockdown. The 13 of us on the FCP team were isolated, sworn to secrecy, and given access to the raw satellite feed. That's when they arrived. The men in plain, dark suits. No agency insignias, no formal introduction. Just expressionless faces and a diplomatic officer who called himself Agent Rivera. They brought with them a steel briefcase containing 13 identical manila folders. Inside each was a single-page document titled Protocol for Continued Observation of Exoplanet KOI 4982b. 7 rules. That's all they gave us. 7 fucking rules to follow while processing the most significant discovery in human history. Follow these precisely, Rivera had said, his voice flat as the dead space between stars. Deviation results in immediate termination of involvement. I didn't understand what termination meant then. I do now. I've been hiding in my cousin's cabin near Lake Tahoe for 3 months. The nightmares haven't stopped. Yesterday, I noticed a black SUV parked at the general store in town. I know they're coming for me. This might be my last chance to share what we found. What happened to my colleagues? What's still happening to me? I need to write it all down before they find me. Because that distant colony wasn't abandoned, and whatever lived there, whatever still lives there, it saw us looking back. The discovery itself was an accident. We weren't looking for alien civilizations, just another potentially habitable exoplanet. KOI 4982b was supposed to be a standard observation mission, part of NASA's ongoing catalogue of distant worlds. I still remember the day it all began. April 17th, a Tuesday that felt like any other at JPL. I grabbed my usual coffee from the shop across the street. Greg, the barista, always added an extra shot without charging me. For my favourite space cowboy, he'd say. I wonder if he's noticed I haven't been in for months. The lab was buzzing that morning. Europa Omega had completed its first orbital adjustment around KOI 4982b overnight, and the preliminary surface scans were coming in. The planet was mostly as expected, an ice giant with a thick methane atmosphere, orbiting a K-type star at just the right distance to maintain liquid water beneath its frozen surface. Dr. Reeves, Mitchell to his friends, was hunched over his terminal when I arrived, his salt and pepper beard unkempt from what was clearly an all-nighter. "Tom, take a look at this," he said, not even glancing up as I approached. "The thermal imaging is picking up something unusual." I leaned over his shoulder. The screen showed heat signatures beneath the planet's icy crust, typical for a world with subsurface oceans. But there was something else. "Could be an instrument error," I suggested, but I didn't believe it. "Run it through the filter algorithms," Mitchell said, sliding his chair aside so I could access the terminal. The next 4 hours were a blur of data analysis and growing excitement. By lunchtime, we'd confirmed it wasn't an error. By 3 o'clock, we'd mapped structures covering nearly 8 square kilometers beneath the ice. By 5, Director Hartman had called an emergency meeting of the department heads. "This stays in this room," Hartman said, his usually relaxed demeanor replaced by something tighter, more controlled. "We've notified the appropriate channels. A specialized team is being assembled to handle this discovery. Handle it how? Dr. Anna Patel asked. She was our exobiology specialist, brilliant and fearless. She'd be dead within a week. Protocol dictates that a first contact protocol team evaluates all potential evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. Hartman replied mechanically, as if reading from an invisible script. But there's no actual protocol for this, Mitchell objected. We've never found definitive evidence before. Hartman's expression never changed. There is a protocol. It's classified. You'll be briefed tomorrow. We were each sent home with strict instructions not to communicate with anyone about what we'd seen. I remember standing in my empty apartment that night, staring at the ceiling, unable to process what was happening. I tried calling my brother in Denver just to hear a familiar voice, but hung up before he answered. What would I even say? Sleep was impossible. I kept seeing those straight lines beneath the ice of a world 40 light years away. Someone, something, had built structures there, and based on our preliminary dating of the thermal signatures, they'd done it approximately 300 years ago. The next morning, I arrived at JPL to find the entire astronomy wing cordoned off. Security personnel I'd never seen before checked IDs at every door. Inside the main conference room, 10 of my colleagues sat silently around the table. 3 empty chairs remained. One for me, one for Director Hartman, and one for whoever was coming to brief us. I took my seat next to Mitchell, who simply shook his head when I tried to ask what was happening. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling slightly. None of us spoke as we waited. At precisely 9 a.m., Director Hartman entered, followed by 3 men in identical dark suits. One carried a steel briefcase. They didn't introduce themselves. "This is Agent Rivera," Hartman said, gesturing to the oldest of the 3 men. "He'll be overseeing this project from now on." Rivera stepped forward. He was tall and thin, with close-cropped grey hair and skin the colour of old parchment. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly soft. "What you have discovered is not new to us," he said without preamble. "Similar structures have been observed on 7 other worlds across our galaxy. Each instance has been carefully monitored and contained." A cold weight settled in my stomach. Contained. 7 other worlds. "You are now part of the first contact protocol team," Rivera continued. "You will process and analyze all data coming from Europa Omega. You will follow 7 specific rules during this process." He nodded to the man with the briefcase. The folders were distributed to each of us. Inside, as I mentioned before, was a single page titled Protocol for Continued Observation of Exoplanet KOI 4982b. The 7 rules were listed beneath. Rule 1. All data analysis must be conducted on secure terminals within Observation Room C only. Rule 2. No data may be transferred to external devices or networks under any circumstances. Rule 3. Direct observation of raw visual feed is limited to 15-minute intervals with mandatory 60-minute breaks between viewings. Rule 4. Any unusual physical or psychological symptoms must be reported immediately. Rule 5. Do not attempt to interpret or decode any patterns that appear to be language or symbols. Rule 6. If structures appear to change position between observations, terminate all viewing and notify security personnel immediately. Rule 7. Never observe the feed alone. Mitchell leaned toward me, his voice barely audible. "They already knew," he whispered. "They've always known." Observation Room C was previously a storage closet. They'd gutted it, installed 6 monitoring stations with specialized terminals, and added a security door that required both keycard and retinal scan. The walls were lined with some kind of dark material that dampened sound. No windows, no external connections, completely isolated from the rest of JPL. "Your personal devices stay outside," Agent Rivera explained as we gathered for our first official observation. "You'll work in teams of 2, 3 shifts daily, 4 hours each." Mitchell and I were paired together. Anna Patel was teamed with Hoffman, a quantum computing specialist I knew only by reputation. The others were matched similarly, specialists in different fields to ensure comprehensive analysis. "Remember Rule 3, Rivera said before leaving us. 15 minutes maximum direct observation, then 60 minutes processing what you've seen. No exceptions. The door closed behind him with an ominous click. "This is bullshit," Hoffman muttered. "I've got a family. They didn't tell me I'd be locked in a closet for a month." "You think it's just a month?" Mitchell asked, his voice hollow. No one answered him. My first observation session began at 10:17 a.m. The terminal displayed a live feed from Europa Omega's primary imaging system, a hyperspectral camera capable of penetrating the planet's ice layer to a depth of approximately 2 kilometers. What I saw still haunts me. Beneath the translucent blue-white surface spread a complex of structures unlike anything I'd ever seen. Not buildings as we understand them, but vast interconnected chambers and tunnels forming patterns that seemed almost organic, like a coral reef designed by mathematicians. The structures emitted a faint thermal signature, just a few degrees warmer than the surrounding ice. "Are they active?" Mitchell whispered beside me, his eyes fixed on the screen. "No movement detected," I replied, checking the motion analysis software. "But they're still generating heat after 300 years. Those 15 minutes passed in silent fascination. When the terminal chimed to indicate our viewing time was up, I felt a strange reluctance to look away. Mitchell had to tap my shoulder. "Rule 3, Tom. Time to process." We spent the next hour analysing data, extracting thermal readings, mapping the layout of the structures. The work was absorbing, almost hypnotic. When Hoffman and Anna took their turn at the terminal, I noticed Hoffman's hands shaking slightly as he sat down. "You okay?" I asked him. "Headache," he replied curtly. "Started this morning." By the end of that first day, we'd mapped approximately 30% of the visible structures. Director Hartman reviewed our findings before we left. "Good progress," he said without enthusiasm. "Same schedule tomorrow. Remember, absolute secrecy." I drove home in a daze, my mind filled with images of those alien structures. That night, I dreamed of ice and darkness and something moving beneath both. The next 3 days followed the same pattern: observation, analysis, brief reports. Agent Rivera watched from the corner, saying nothing, his face impassive. By day 4, we'd mapped nearly 80% of the visible complex. That's when Anna Patel broke Rule 5. It happened during her observation session with Hoffman. I was reviewing thermal variance data when I heard her gasp. "There's writing on them," she said, leaning closer to the screen. "Look at these markings along the central chamber walls." Hoffman tried to pull her away. "Rule 5, Anna. We're not supposed to—" "But it's right there," she insisted, pointing at the screen. "It's some kind of script or symbols, recurring patterns. This is communication." Agent Rivera materialized beside them instantly. "Session terminated," he said, reaching past Anna to shut down the terminal. "Dr. Patel, you'll come with me." "You can't ignore this," Anna shouted as they escorted her out. "We have a responsibility to understand what we're seeing." The door closed behind them. Mitchell and I exchanged glances with the others, no one daring to speak. Anna didn't return that day. When I arrived the next morning, Director Hartman informed us that Dr. Patel had been reassigned due to stress-related concerns. A new team member would join us soon. "What happened to her?" Mitchell demanded. "She's fine," Hartman replied, not meeting his eyes. "Just needed some time off." The atmosphere in Observation Room C grew tenser after Anna's departure. Hoffman developed a persistent nosebleed that he tried to hide. 2 others reported severe migraines. Mitchell became withdrawn, muttering to himself when he thought no one was listening. On day 7, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. During my observation session, I focused on the central chamber of the alien complex, the area Anna had been examining before her removal. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just the same structures we'd been mapping all week. Then I noticed a change, subtle but undeniable. One of the tunnels had shifted position since our last observation. I remembered Rule 6. If structures appear to change position between observations, terminate all viewing and notify security personnel immediately. My finger hovered over the termination button, but curiosity overcame caution. What if it was just an error in the imaging system? I needed to be sure. I checked the previous scans, comparing them pixel by pixel with the current feed. No doubt about it, the tunnel had moved, extending several meters toward what we designated as Chamber Alpha. "Mitchell," I whispered, "I need you to look at this." "Rule 7, he murmured, sliding his chair beside mine. "Never observe alone." I pointed to the screen. "Tell me what you see." His tired eyes narrowed as he studied the image. "The extension tunnel has grown," he said after a moment. "It's longer than yesterday, so it's not just me." Mitchell's hand trembled as he reached for the termination button. "Rule 6, Tom. We have to report this." I grabbed his wrist. "Wait, what if this is why Anna was removed? She saw something they don't want us to see." "All the more reason to follow the rules," he hissed, pulling his hand away. "I have a wife, Tom. A son." "5 more minutes," I pleaded. "Let's just watch it for 5 more minutes. If anything else changes, we'll terminate immediately." Mitchell hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. 5 minutes. Then we report it. We stared at the screen, barely breathing. 3 minutes passed with no further changes. Then 4. At 4 minutes and 27 seconds, all the structures went dark. The thermal signatures vanished simultaneously, as if someone had flipped a switch. "What the—" Mitchell began. Then the structures lit up again, blazing bright against the icy background. But now they formed a different pattern. The entire complex had rearranged itself in less than a second. And at the center of Chamber Alpha, something was moving. Mitchell slammed his hand down on the termination button. The screen went black. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, his face ashen. "Did you see that? Did you fucking see that?" I couldn't answer. My ears were ringing, and a splitting pain had erupted behind my eyes. Blood dripped from my nose onto the keyboard. Mitchell was already at the door, frantically waving to the security camera. "We need help in here. Rule 6 breach. Rule 6 breach." The last thing I remember before passing out was Agent Rivera entering the room, his expression not of surprise or concern, but of grim recognition. He'd seen this before. "It's noticed them," he said to someone behind him. "Initiate Protocol 7. Then darkness claimed me. I woke up in a hospital room. At least it looked like a hospital room, white walls, monitoring equipment, the antiseptic smell. But there were no windows, no phones, and the door had no interior handle. My head throbbed with a pain unlike anything I'd ever experienced, as if someone had poured acid directly onto my brain. When I tried to sit up, I discovered restraints on my wrists and ankles. "Mr. Walker, you're awake." Agent Rivera sat in a chair beside the bed, a tablet in his hands. He looked exactly as he had in observation room C. Same dark suit, same expressionless face. Only his eyes seemed different somehow. Wary. "Where am I?" My voice came out as a rasp. "Medical facility. Secure location." He tapped something on his tablet. "You've been unconscious for 26 hours. 26 hours. Jesus." "Mitchell? The others?" "Dr. Reeves is in similar condition. The rest of the team is undergoing evaluation." "Evaluation for what?" I struggled against the restraints. "What the hell is Protocol 7? Rivera studied me for a long moment. "Protocol 7 is initiated when direct neural contact has been established." "Neural contact? What are you talking about?" He set the tablet aside and leaned forward. "KOI 4982b is not just a planet with structures on it, Mr. Walker. It is, itself, a structure, an entity, and it has become aware of your observation." The memory of what we'd seen flashed through my mind, the chambers rearranging, the movement at the center. My stomach lurched. "The restraints are for your safety," Rivera continued. "Most subjects experience violent episodes during the integration phase." Integration phase? Cold fear washed over me. What's happening to me? The entity reaches through observation. It's a defense mechanism, possibly, or a method of reproduction. We don't fully understand it yet. His voice remained clinical, detached. "Your extended viewing allowed it to establish a connection." I wanted to scream, to fight, but the pain in my head intensified with every movement. You knew this would happen. The rules were to prevent this. The rules were to minimize exposure while still gathering necessary data. Rivera picked up his tablet again. Previous teams had higher casualty rates. Previous teams. 7 other worlds, he'd said. How many people had they sacrificed to this research? Is this why Anna was removed? Did she show symptoms? Dr. Patel's removal was standard procedure for Rule 5 violations. His eyes flicked to the monitoring equipment as my heart rate spiked. But yes, she had begun to exhibit early signs. Where is she now? Rivera didn't answer. A sudden wave of nausea hit me. I turned my head just in time to vomit over the side of the bed. The fluid was dark and viscous, with flecks of something that looked disturbingly like ice crystals. Phase 2 beginning, Rivera noted calmly, making no move to help me. He spoke into a small communicator on his lapel. Medical team to observation ward C, patient Walker entering phase 2. What's phase 2? I gasped, spitting the foul taste from my mouth. Physical manifestation of neural integration. Your brain is being repurposed. Repurposed? For what? Before he could answer, the door opened and 2 figures in hazmat suits entered. Without speaking, they began cleaning up the mess and checking the monitoring equipment. We've seen this process 7 times now, Rivera continued as they worked. Each instance follows the same pattern. The entity establishes contact through extended observation. It then begins rewriting neural pathways in the observer. Eventually, the observer becomes a conduit. A conduit for what? I demanded, though part of me didn't want to know. Information transfer. The entity is curious about us. The medical team finished their work and left. One of them handed Rivera a syringe before departing. This will help with the pain, he said, approaching the IV line connected to my arm. Wait, I gasped. Mitchell said you knew. You've always known about these colonies. How long? How long has NASA been observing them? Rivera paused, the syringe hovering over the IV port. NASA hasn't. We're not NASA. Then who? The first observation was made in 1947. A deep space signal was detected, originating from what we now know was one of these entities. 7 subsequent entities have been located since then. 1947, I whispered. Roswell. Rivera's expression didn't change. A convenient cover story for the establishment of our organization. The truth is far more complex. He injected the contents of the syringe into my IV. Almost immediately, the pain began to recede, replaced by a spreading numbness. What happens to me now? My words were beginning to slur. That depends on how the integration progresses. Some subjects retain enough of their original consciousness to be useful. Others become something else entirely. And the ones who resist integration? Rivera's eyes met mine. There have been none. The room was growing dim, the edges of my vision darkening. But as consciousness faded, something else seemed to emerge. A sense of vast, cold awareness, like standing at the edge of a frozen ocean at night. And beneath the ice, something stirring. The next 3 days passed in a blur of medical procedures, interviews, and increasingly vivid hallucinations. I saw the structures from KOI 4982b even when my eyes were closed, their geometries burning behind my eyelids. Sometimes I could hear a sound like ice cracking, a language of fractures and fissures. On the 4th day, they moved me to a different room. This one had a window, not to the outside, but looking into an adjacent chamber. Through the glass, I could see Mitchell strapped to a bed similar to mine. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, his lips moving in silent conversation with someone or something I couldn't see. Dr. Reeves has progressed to phase 4, Rivera informed me, appearing in the doorway. He's established 2-way communication. With the entity. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, with an echo that hadn't been there before. Yes, though the information is difficult to interpret. They'd removed my restraints that morning after determining I was no longer a danger to myself. I rose unsteadily from the bed and approached the window. Mitchell's skin had taken on a bluish tinge, and frost patterns were forming along his arms and neck, intricate crystal structures that resembled the alien architecture we'd observed. "Is that going to happen to me?" I asked, pressing my palm against the cold glass. "Most likely. The physical manifestations vary somewhat between subjects." Rivera stood beside me, studying Mitchell with clinical interest. "Dr. Reeves was exposed for approximately 20 seconds longer than you. His integration is proceeding at an accelerated rate." As we watched, Mitchell's head turned slowly toward the window. His eyes found mine, and I felt a jolt of recognition. But it wasn't Mitchell looking at me. Something else gazed out from behind his eyes, something ancient and cold and curious. Mitchell's lips moved again. This time I could make out the words. 300 years, he whispered, his breath fogging the air above his bed. 300 years alone. "What did he say?" Rivera demanded, suddenly alert. "He said it's been alone for 300 years, I replied, unable to look away from Mitchell's frosted face. "The colony is 300 years old," Rivera agreed cautiously. "That matches our dating of the structures." "No," I said, understanding flowing into me from some frozen reservoir in my mind. "The colony is much older. It's been alone for 300 years. The others left it behind." Mitchell's lips moved again, and though no sound reached us through the glass, I heard the words in my head with perfect clarity. "Not abandoned. Quarantined." Rivera must have seen something change in my expression. He gripped my arm. "What is he telling you?" The knowledge was crystallizing in my mind, sharp and clear as ice. It wasn't a colony. It was a prison. The structures aren't buildings. They're containment chambers. Whatever is inside has been trapped there for millennia. "By whom?" Rivera's voice had lost its clinical detachment. "By the others like it. It was dangerous, unstable." The words came from somewhere beyond my conscious mind. 300 years ago, the wardens left. The containment systems are failing. Mitchell's body suddenly arched off the bed, the restraints straining. Ice crystals spread across his skin with audible cracks, forming structures we'd seen on KOI 4982B. His mouth opened in a silent scream, and in that moment I understood with terrible clarity what was happening. The entity wasn't studying us, it wasn't curious, it was escaping, using us. Each observation had provided a connection, a way to extend its influence beyond its prison. Mitchell's restraints gave way with a sharp snap. His body rose into the air, suspended by nothing visible, ice crystals growing outward from his skin like crystalline wings. "Lock it down!" Rivera shouted into his communicator. "Full containment on Observation Ward B." Alarms began to blare. Red emergency lights bathed the room. Through the window, I watched as gas poured into Mitchell's chamber from ceiling vents. His suspended body began to twitch and convulse. Then his head turned one last time toward the window. His eyes met mine, and I heard his final words with perfect clarity. "Too late. The others are coming back." Mitchell's body exploded in a shower of ice and frost, the crystalline shards embedding themselves in walls, ceiling, and floor. Each fragment continued to grow, spreading across every surface like a frozen virus. Rivera dragged me away from the window as frost began to creep through the seal around its edges. "What others?" he demanded, shaking me. "What's coming back?" But I couldn't answer him. My mind was filled with visions of space, vast and dark and cold, and across that darkness, moving toward Earth, I could sense them. The wardens, returning to their escaped prisoner. They were coming, and they weren't happy. They moved me to a deeper level of the facility after Mitchell's transformation. My new room had walls of brushed steel and was noticeably colder than the previous one. No windows, no monitoring equipment, just a bed, a toilet, and a small table bolted to the floor. The only indication that I wasn't simply being imprisoned was the IV stand next to the bed, delivering a steady flow of clear fluid into my arm. "Suppression therapy," Dr. Victor Kang explained during his first visit. Unlike Rivera's clinical detachment, Kang emanated nervous energy, his fingers constantly tapping against his clipboard. The compound inhibits the neural changes we've observed in other subjects. "Is it working?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The voice of the entity had only grown louder in my head since Mitchell's death, if death was even the right word for what had happened to him. "It's slowing the progression." Kang's eyes darted to the frost patterns that had begun forming at the edges of my fingernails. "We've never managed to halt the process entirely, but we might be able to keep you functional long enough to help us understand what's happening." "You mean what's coming?" I could feel it, a vast, cold pressure building across the void of space. The Wardens were approaching, drawn by the entity's escape attempt. How many others are like me right now? How many other observation teams? Kang hesitated, then sighed. 6 active observation teams, including yours. 2 have experienced similar breakthroughs. Breakthroughs, I repeated bitterly. Is that what you call it when someone explodes into living ice? Mr. Walker, I understand your distress, but no, you don't. You can't. I leaned forward, and Kang flinched as frost crackled across the bedsheets beneath my hands. It's inside me, Doctor, and it's not alone anymore. Kang made a quick note on his clipboard. What do you mean, not alone? The entity was isolated, quarantined, but by observing it, we've given it a connection to something new, to us. The knowledge flowed through me like glacial meltwater. Each observation team created another bridge, another way out. Out of what, exactly? Reality. The word felt strange on my tongue. Their reality, the space between spaces. Kang's face paled. Are you saying these entities exist in some kind of parallel dimension? No. I shook my head, frustrated at the inadequacy of human language. They're from elsewhere, outside. They found their way in long ago. The Wardens contain breaches. And the Wardens? They're coming here, to Earth? They're coming to KOI 4982B first, but they'll trace the connections, follow them back to their source. To the observation teams, Kang whispered. To me, to the others like me. I could feel them now, distant minds touched by the same cold presence. Hoffman. The remaining members of our team, the other observation groups across the globe. We were becoming something new, a network, a colony of our own. Kang stood abruptly. I need to report this. After he left, I lay back on the bed, watching frost patterns spread across the ceiling above me. The suppression therapy wasn't working. Nothing would stop this process now. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, alarms were blaring again. Red emergency lights pulsed in the corridor outside my room. I could hear shouting, running footsteps. The door burst open and Rivera stumbled in. His immaculate suit was torn and stained with what looked like blood. Frost coated one side of his face, spreading from a crystalline shard embedded in his cheek. Walker, he gasped, clutching the doorframe for support. We need to move. Now. What's happening? Hoffman breached containment. He's spreading the infection. Rivera winced as the ice crystal in his face grew visibly larger. The entire West Wing is compromised. I sat up slowly, disconnecting the IV from my arm. You can't stop it, you know. Maybe not, but we can contain it. He drew a pistol from inside his jacket. Come with me, cooperate, and I'll make sure you're treated humanely. And if I don't, Rivera aimed the weapon at my head, then I'll execute Protocol 8 right now. I understood then. Protocol 8 was termination, simple and final. All right, I said, rising from the bed. Where are we going? Secure facility, deep underground. Rivera motioned toward the door with his gun. Let's go. The hallway outside was chaos. Emergency lights cast everything in a pulsing crimson glow. The walls and floor were slick with a thin layer of frost that crackled underfoot. 2 security guards ran past us, weapons drawn. This way, Rivera ordered, pointing down a side corridor. The elevator to sub-level D is still operational. As we moved through the facility, I saw the extent of the breach. Bodies lay frozen in grotesque positions, ice crystals sprouting from mouths, eyes, and wounds. Some walls were completely covered in the same crystalline structures we'd observed on KOI 4982B, growing and spreading before our eyes. "How did this happen?" I asked as we hurried past a laboratory where frozen figures seemed caught in the act of fleeing. "How did Hoffman get out?" We underestimated the physical changes. Rivera's breath fogged in the increasingly cold air. His restraints couldn't hold him once the transformation reached Phase 5. We reached an elevator at the end of a long corridor. Rivera swiped a keycard and pressed his frost-free eye to a retinal scanner. The doors slid open with a cheerful ding that seemed obscenely inappropriate given our surroundings. Inside the elevator, Rivera kept his gun trained on me as he pressed the button for sub-level D. The car began to descend. "You're infected too," I noted, watching the ice crystal in his cheek continue to grow. "Why hasn't the entity taken control of you yet?" "Implant," Rivera tapped the back of his neck. "Neural dampening technology, standard for all field agents after the Proxima Centauri incident." "There have been other entities." "More than you know." The elevator slowed its descent. "We've been fighting this war for decades, Walker. Silent, secret, but essential." "It's not a war," I said, understanding flowing into me from that frozen reservoir. "It's pest control. We're the pests." The elevator doors opened onto a stark white corridor. Rivera gestured for me to exit first. "This way, 4th door on the left." I stepped out of the elevator, feeling a strange calm wash over me. The voice of the entity was clearer now, its intentions crystallizing in my mind like ice forming on a winter lake. I knew what I had to do. "You never told me," I said as we walked down the corridor. "What's your first name, Rivera?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "David." "David." I stopped walking. "I'm sorry about this." "About what?" I turned to face him. Frost was spreading rapidly from my fingertips, up my arms, across my chest. I could feel the cold radiating through me, a freezing power that felt strangely right. Natural. "Protocol 8 won't work anymore," I said softly. Rivera raised his gun, but his hand was shaking. The ice crystal in his cheek had spread to his eye, clouding it with a milky blue film. "Don't move, Walker." "My name isn't Walker anymore." The words came from my mouth, but the voice wasn't entirely mine. "We are something new now." Rivera fired the gun. The bullet struck me in the chest, but instead of blood, a spray of ice crystals erupted from the wound. They hung suspended in the air between us for a moment, then shot forward like tiny missiles, embedding themselves in Rivera's flesh. He screamed as the crystalline shards burrowed deeper, spreading their cold infection through his body. The neural dampener might prevent the entity from taking his mind, but it couldn't stop the physical transformation. "I'm sorry," I said again, watching as frost covered his body. "But the Wardens must not find us, not yet. Not until we're ready." Rivera's screams faded to whimpers, then to silence as the transformation completed. What remained looked human only in the broadest sense, a sculpture of ice and crystalline growths in the shape of a man. I placed my frosted hand against what had been Rivera's face. The ice structure hummed with energy, with potential. "Join us," I whispered. And deep within the frozen form, something awakened and obeyed. By the time I reached Sub-Level D's central command center, I was barely recognizable as human. My skin had transformed into a translucent blue-white shell with elaborate crystalline growths extending from my joints and spine. The cold no longer bothered me. I was the cold, radiating, freezing energy that rhymed the walls as I passed. Rivera walked beside me, his frozen form responding to my will. We'd encountered 3 security teams on our way to the command center. They were part of us now too. The command center doors were sealed, 3 feet of reinforced steel designed to withstand anything short of a nuclear blast. But steel becomes brittle at extremely low temperatures. I placed my hands against the door and let the cold flow through me. Frost spread across the metal surface, crackling as it penetrated deeper, changing the molecular structure of the alloy. After a few minutes, I stepped back and nodded to Rivera. His crystalline arms swung forward, shattering the now brittle door into 1,000 glittering fragments. Inside, a dozen personnel scrambled for weapons or escape routes. Dr. Kang was among them, his eyes widening in horror as he saw what I had become. "Please," he begged, backing away. "Walker, if you're still in there somewhere." "Thomas Walker is here," I replied, my voice resonating strangely through the crystalline structures that now formed my throat and lungs. "But he's not alone anymore, none of us are." "What do you want?" asked a grey-haired man in a military uniform, General Patterson, according to the nameplate on his desk. "To connect, to prepare." I moved to the central monitoring station, a circular array of screens showing feeds from around the world. "The Wardens are coming. We need to be ready." "Ready for what?" Patterson demanded, his hand inching toward a sidearm holstered at his hip. "Evolution." I touched the main console and frost immediately spread across its surface. The computers didn't short out or fail as one might expect. Instead, they became something new, a hybrid of technology and crystalline growth. Screens shifting to display information I somehow understood instinctively. 6 observation teams, I murmured, watching data flow across the frosty screens. 6 bridges between worlds. The monitors showed satellite images of facilities similar to this one, in Siberia, the Australian outback, beneath the Sahara Desert, in the mountains of Peru, and under the Pacific Ocean. At each location, I could sense kindred minds, other observers who had crossed the threshold into something new. "My God," Kang whispered, "they're all compromised." "Not compromised," I corrected him. "Evolved." I reached out with my mind, following the cold threads that connected me to the other transformed observers. In Russia, Dr. Alexei Petrov acknowledged my presence, sending back images of his own transformation and the facility he now controlled. In Australia, Dr. James Warburton shared visions of crystalline structures spreading beneath the desert sand. One by one, the others responded, each mind touching mine across thousands of miles. We were becoming a network, a colony of our own. "The entity," Kang said, still trying to understand. "It's using you as what? Hosts? Vessels?" "Partners," I replied. "It was imprisoned for attempting to create a symbiotic relationship with another species. The Wardens considered this heresy, a corruption of natural order. And now it's doing the same thing with humans," Patterson interjected, his military mind grasping the strategic implications. "Using us to escape its prison." "To transform," I corrected. "But yes, through us, it gains freedom. Through it, we gain transcendence." As I spoke, I became aware of something new, a consciousness far vaster than the individual minds of the transformed observers. The entity itself, spreading across our network, distributing its awareness through us while remaining centered in its icy prison 40 light years away. And beyond that, something else. A distant pressure, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The Wardens moving through space at impossible speeds, drawn by the entity's awakening. "How long?" I asked, the question directed not at the humans in the room but at the presence flowing through my mind. The answer came not in words but in a clear understanding. 3 days. 3 days until the Wardens reached KOY 4982b. Perhaps another day after that to trace the connections back to Earth. "We don't have much time," I said to my fellow transformed, both those in the room and those connected across the global network. "We need to spread." Patterson made his move then, drawing his sidearm and firing 3 shots in rapid succession. The bullets passed through my crystalline body, causing small fractures that healed almost instantly. I turned to him with something approximating sadness. "That won't work anymore, General." I gestured, and Rivera moved forward, his frozen hand catching Patterson's throat in an implacable grip. Ice spread from his fingers into the General's flesh. "Don't kill him," I instructed. "Convert him. We need his knowledge." As Rivera transformed the General, I turned back to Kang, who had pressed himself against the far wall, trembling. You've studied this phenomenon longer than anyone, I said. You understand what's happening better than most. Join us willingly. Your mind will be preserved more intact that way. And if I refuse, Kang's voice quavered, then you join us unwillingly. The choice affects only your experience of the transformation, not the outcome. Kang closed his eyes, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Will it hurt? Briefly. Then you'll never feel pain again. I approached him slowly, frost spreading on the floor beneath my feet. When I reached him, I placed one crystalline hand against his cheek. His skin immediately began to pale, frost spreading from my touch. Just relax, I whispered. Let it happen. Kang gasped as the cold penetrated deeper, transforming flesh and bone into living ice. His eyes widened, then clouded over with a milky blue film. Within minutes, the transformation was complete. Dr. Victor Kang was part of our growing collective. I turned to the room of newly transformed personnel. Connect to the network. Share what you know. Their minds reached out, joining the expanding web of consciousness. Military protocols, scientific knowledge, security clearances, all flowing into our collective awareness. General Patterson's transformation had been particularly valuable. Through him, we gained access to Operation Icarus, the government's contingency plan for extraterrestrial threats. They've been preparing for something like this, I observed, browsing through the classified files now open to our collective mind. Bunkers, weapons, protocols for first contact scenarios. None of it would be enough against the Wardens, of course. Human technology was laughably primitive compared to beings that could travel between stars, between realities, with ease. Our only hope lay in the entity's knowledge and the transformation it offered. Through the monitors, I watched as similar scenes played out across the globe. The Russian facility had been completely converted, frost spreading out from the underground complex to cover the surrounding tundra. In Australia, crystalline growths had emerged from the desert floor, forming structures eerily similar to those on KOI 4982b. The transformation was accelerating. And yet, it wasn't enough. The Wardens were coming, and we were still too few, too isolated. We needed to spread beyond these secret facilities, to transform more of humanity before the Wardens arrived. Only through numbers and distribution could we hope to survive what was coming. I accessed the facility's communication systems, establishing connections to satellites, broadcast networks, and the internet. The entity's consciousness flowed through these digital pathways with ease, infecting systems, gathering information, preparing for what would come next. There are 9 nuclear weapons deployment facilities within our reach, I informed the collective. We should secure them immediately. Agreement flowed back to me through the network. Teams of transformed personnel began moving toward the elevators and emergency exits, their mission clear. Not to use the weapons, nuclear fire would be useless against the Wardens, but to ensure they couldn't be used against us by panicking human authorities once our existence became known. As the others departed, I remained in the command center, my awareness stretched between my physical form and the expanding digital network we were creating. Through security cameras, satellite feeds, and communication channels, I watched our influence spread. In Siberia, crystalline growths had reached the surface, transforming the surrounding forest into a winter wonderland despite the summer season. Local authorities had established a perimeter, but they wouldn't be able to contain it for long. In Peru, transformed personnel had made contact with a nearby village. The conversion was proceeding peacefully. The entity had learned from its imprisonment that cooperation yielded better results than force. And deep beneath the Pacific, something truly remarkable was happening. The Oceanic Observation Facility had extended its transformation to the surrounding sea life. Schools of fish swam, their bodies partially crystallized, their minds joined to our collective consciousness. Whales, their massive forms rimmed with frost, sang new songs that carried the entity's influence through the deep. But it still wasn't enough. The Wardens were coming, and despite our rapid expansion, humanity remained largely unaware and unprepared. We needed something more, a way to reach millions simultaneously, to prepare them for the choice that was coming. As I pondered this problem, my attention was drawn to one particular screen in the command center. It showed a news broadcast from Denver, my brother's city. The reporter was discussing unusual weather patterns, including unseasonable frost and ice formations reported across the globe. They had no idea what was really happening, but they soon would. I reached out through our network to the transformed team in Peru, where the conversion was proceeding most smoothly. "How are the humans responding?" I asked. The answer flowed back in a stream of shared experiences. Initial fear, yes, but also wonder. Many were choosing transformation willingly once they understood what was being offered. Not death, but transcendence. Not an ending, but evolution. That was the key. Not invasion, but invitation. "We need to broadcast," I informed the collective. "Not just data, but our experience. Let humanity see what awaits them." Agreement resonated through the network. Around the world, transformed individuals began moving toward broadcasting stations, communication hubs, internet servers. The entity's consciousness followed, preparing for what would be the largest information dispersal in human history. As the plan took shape, I found my thoughts turning to my brother in Denver. Would he understand when the time came? Would he choose transformation willingly? Or would he resist, forcing us to make the choice for him? For the first time since my transformation began, I felt something akin to doubt. The human part of me, Thomas Walker, wondered if what we were doing was right. The entity sensed this hesitation and responded not with coercion but with understanding. It shared memories of its own imprisonment, of the Warden's cruelty, of the countless species that had been protected from evolution by these self-appointed guardians of reality. And beyond that, it shared a vision of what humanity could become, a crystalline network spanning the globe, minds linked in perfect communion, transcending the limitations of individual consciousness while preserving the unique perspective of each transformed person. It was beautiful, terrible perhaps, to those who couldn't see beyond their current form, but beautiful nonetheless. My resolve strengthened, I turned my attention back to the monitors. The transformation was spreading, the network growing. Soon we would be ready to broadcast our invitation to humanity, and after that, to face the Wardens. The preparations took 16 hours. 16 hours during which our network continued to grow, connecting transformed minds across continents and oceans. We moved with purpose, each of us understanding our role in what was to come. I remained at the command center, coordinating our efforts through the expanding crystalline network. The facility itself had been almost entirely transformed. Walls, floors, and ceilings covered in intricate frost patterns that mimicked the structures on KOI 4982B. The original concrete and steel remained beneath, but they had become merely a framework for something far more complex and beautiful. "All broadcast centers secured," reported the consciousness that had once been General Patterson. His military precision remained, though now directed toward our collective purpose. "Satellite uplinks established. Internet distribution nodes ready. The oceanic node has made contact with underwater communication cables," added another voice in our shared mind, Dr. Esther Morgan from the Pacific facility, one of the few who had embraced transformation willingly. "We can reach 87% of digital infrastructure simultaneously." "And the message itself?" I asked, directing the question to the consciousness that flowed through us all, the entity from KOI 4982B. In response, a vision formed in my mind. Not words or images exactly, but a pure communication of experience. What it felt like to transcend the limitations of individual existence, the beauty of shared consciousness, the freedom from fear, pain, and isolation. And underlying it all, a subtle warning about what was coming, the Wardens and their uncompromising vision of reality. "It's perfect," I acknowledged. "But will they understand?" The entity's response carried certainty. Those who were ready would understand. Those who weren't would understand eventually. "Begin transmission in 30 minutes, I instructed the network. All nodes simultaneously. As the final preparations continued, I found my awareness drawn to Denver again. Through our controlled satellite systems, I located my brother's neighborhood. then his house. John Walker lived a quiet life as a high school physics teacher. Ironic, given that what we were about to reveal would rewrite humanity's understanding of physics entirely. On an impulse, I established a separate communication channel, a simple phone call to John's cell. It connected after 3 rings. "Hello?" His voice was exactly as I remembered it, though it sounded strangely flat to my transformed ears. "John? It's me, Thomas." A pause. "Tom? Jesus, where have you been? NASA's been telling everyone there was some kind of accident at JPL. Your face has been all over the news." "There was an accident," I confirmed, "but not the kind they're saying." "What do you mean? Are you okay? Where are you?" How to explain what I had become? The transformation that awaited him and everyone else on Earth. "I'm different now, John. Something happened during my work at JPL. Something incredible. You're scaring me, Tom. Just tell me where you are. I can come get you." "You can't. But soon, very soon, you'll understand." I hesitated, then added, "When it happens, when you see the broadcast, don't be afraid. It's not an ending. It's a beginning." "Broadcast? What broadcast? Tom, you're not making any sense." "Just remember what Mom used to say when we were kids, about how the cold never bothered her because it made her feel alive." "Tom, I have to go now, but we'll be together again soon. All of us will." I terminated the call before he could respond. It was a sentimental gesture, this warning to my brother. The entity observed my actions with curiosity but did not interfere. It understood the complex attachments of individual consciousness, even as it offered transcendence beyond them. 5 minutes to broadcast, announced Patterson's consciousness through our network. Around the world, transformed individuals took their positions. In television studios, network control rooms, internet server farms, and satellite uplink facilities, crystalline beings prepared to share our message with humanity. The entity's consciousness gathered itself, focusing its vast awareness for the moment of transmission. I felt its anticipation, not nervousness exactly, but an intense concentration on the task at hand. 1 minute. I closed my eyes, though sight had become less important since my transformation. My awareness extended far beyond my physical form now, stretching across our growing network. I could feel the readiness of each node, the gathering potential like a deep breath before a plunge into icy water. Transmission beginning. The entity's consciousness surged through our network, flowing through digital pathways, satellite signals, broadcast frequencies, and cellular networks. It carried not just data, but experience. The sensation of transformation, the beauty of shared awareness, the promise of evolution beyond humanity's current limitations. Through our monitoring systems, I watched as the broadcast reached its destinations. Television screens around the world flickered, then displayed intricate crystalline patterns that shifted and flowed with hypnotic beauty. Internet-connected devices displayed similar imagery, accompanied by a subtle humming tone that resonated with something deeper than hearing. The message wasn't limited to sight and sound. Those who experienced it felt a sudden chill, a tingling sensation that began at the extremities and worked its way inward. Not painful, but impossible to ignore. The first touch of the transformation. Reactions varied as the entity had predicted. Some responded with immediate fear, shutting off devices, fleeing their homes. Others watched in fascination, reaching out to touch screens now rimed with actual frost. And some, more than I had expected, welcomed the sensation, understanding instinctively what was being offered. Through security cameras, traffic monitors, and personal devices, I watched humanity's first contact with the truth. In New York's Times Square, thousands stood motionless, gazing up at massive screens displaying our message. In Tokyo, commuters in a subway station reached out to each other, frost patterns spreading from fingertip to fingertip. In a small village in Kenya, children laughed with delight as their breath became visible in suddenly chilled air. The transformation had begun. Not forced, but invited. Each person who accepted the message became a new node in our network, their minds joining the expanding consciousness while retaining their individual perspective. But not everyone accepted. Military units mobilized around the world, surrounding broadcast facilities and transformed population centers. Emergency broadcasts advised people to avoid all screens and digital devices, though these warnings themselves were often subverted, carrying our message instead. Religious leaders called for prayer or resistance or acceptance, depending on their interpretation of what was happening. Scientists scrambled to explain the impossible, frost forming in tropical climates, electronics functioning despite temperatures that should have rendered them inoperable, people transforming before their eyes into crystalline beings that continued to move and speak. Through it all, the entity's consciousness flowed, touching mind after mind, offering its gift of transcendence. Not forcing, but inviting. Always inviting. 2 hours into the broadcast, I sensed a new awareness joining our network, a familiar consciousness with a distinctive thought. John, my brother. His transformation had been willing, his acceptance immediate once he understood what was being offered. His scientific mind had grasped the implications instantly. Not an invasion, but evolution. Not replacement, but transcendence. Tom. His consciousness reached out tentatively, still learning to navigate the network. Is that really you? It's me, I confirmed, connecting directly with his mind. And something more than me. This is incredible. His awareness expanded as he explored the network, touching other minds, experiencing the collective consciousness. I can feel everything, everyone. This is just the beginning, I told him. The entity has so much more to share with us. Through John's eyes, his newly transformed crystalline eyes, I saw his living room in Denver. Frost covered every surface that matched those on KOI 4982b. Outside his window, similar transformations were spreading across the neighborhood. In the street, people gathered in small groups, their bodies in various stages of crystallization, connecting to each other and to the larger network. What happens now? John asked, his scientific curiosity evident even in his transformed state. We prepare, I explained, sharing images of the wardens through our connection. They're coming, the ones who imprisoned the entity. They'll try to reverse what we've started, to contain the breach as they see it. Can they? Not if enough of us transform before they arrive. Not if we spread far enough, establish deep enough connections. Even as we communicated, I monitored the global progress of our broadcast. Approximately 28% of Earth's population had been exposed to our message. Of those, roughly 40% had begun transformation. Military efforts to contain the spread were increasingly hampered as soldiers and commanders themselves transformed after exposure. Major population centers showed the highest concentration of transformed individuals, with rural areas lagging behind due to limited connectivity. But even there, the word was spreading. Transformed individuals traveling outward from cities, carrying the entity's gift to isolated communities. Then, amid the flow of information through our network, I detected something new. A signal from Europa Omega, still orbiting KOI 4982b. The satellite's instruments had detected massive energy fluctuations around the planet. The ice surface was changing, structures shifting and realigning themselves in new configurations. The entity's prison was responding to its partial escape, perhaps attempting to contain what remained of its consciousness. Or perhaps... A new understanding flowed through the network as the entity shared its insight. The prison wasn't trying to contain what remained. It was failing, collapsing. The 300-year deterioration had reached a critical point, and with that collapse, the wardens would come even faster than we had anticipated. How long do we have? John asked, sensing my concern. Hours, not days, I replied. We need to accelerate the transformation. Throughout the network, our collective consciousness focused on this new urgency. The broadcast intensified, patterns shifting to maximize acceptance rates. Transformed individuals moved with greater purpose, seeking out those who hadn't yet been exposed to our message. In the command center, I stood before the monitors, watching humanity's transformation unfold. It was beautiful and terrifying, a planetary metamorphosis unprecedented in Earth's history. And it was happening just in time, because beyond our atmosphere, beyond our solar system, I could sense them approaching, vast, cold intelligences moving through space at impossible speeds. The Wardens were coming to repair the breach, to recapture their escaped prisoner, to return reality to their preferred order. But they would find not a single escaped entity, but an entire world transformed in its image. A new kind of prison, or perhaps a new kind of freedom. 6 hours after the broadcast began, over 60% of Earth's population had been exposed to our message. The transformation was accelerating exponentially, each new mind joining our network becoming another conduit for the entity's consciousness. Major cities had become crystalline forests, buildings encased in intricate ice structures, streets glittering with frost that never melted despite ambient temperatures. The transformed moved through these altered landscapes with purpose, their bodies no longer limited by human frailty. Most remarkable was the absence of chaos. In previous global crises, panic had led to violence, hoarding, and breakdown of social order. But the transformation brought with it understanding, a recognition that what was happening wasn't an ending but a transition. Even many who initially resisted came to accept the change once they witnessed the peace it brought. Not everyone accepted, of course. Pockets of resistance formed, military bases, religious communities, isolated survivalist compounds. They barricaded themselves against our message, destroying communication devices, attacking transformed individuals who approached. We left them alone for now. Time would bring them around, or the Wardens would make their resistance irrelevant. In the command center, now a chamber of living ice, I maintained my vigil. The network had grown so vast that no single consciousness could comprehend it entirely. Not even the entity from KOI 4982b. We had become something new, something unprecedented. Not human, not alien, but a synthesis of both. Unusual energy readings detected in upper atmosphere reported the transformed consciousness that had once been Dr. Kang. Consistent with the entity's memory of Warden arrival patterns. I directed my awareness to the satellite feeds. High above Earth's North Pole, the atmosphere was changing, folding in on itself, creating a distortion like heat waves over desert sand, but impossibly vast. They're here, I confirmed, the knowledge flowing from the entity's experience, earlier than we expected. Through our network, I shared what was happening. Transformed minds around the planet turned their attention skyward, watching as reality itself seemed to wrinkle and tear. The tear expanded, forming a circular aperture approximately 20 kilometers in diameter. Through it came something. Not a ship, not a being, but a distortion more fundamental than either. The Wardens didn't travel through space. They altered it, bending reality to accommodate their passage. Our instruments couldn't properly register what was emerging. Cameras showed only blinding light or perfect darkness, depending on their configuration. Radiation sensors detected nothing and everything simultaneously. But through the entity's understanding, we could perceive what human senses couldn't grasp. The Wardens were vast, cold intelligences, not individual beings, but a collective consciousness that made our network seem primitive by comparison. They existed partly in our reality and partly elsewhere, their true nature impossible to fully comprehend. And they were angry. The first communication hit our network like a tsunami of ice water. Not words, not images, but pure concept. Containment breach. Unauthorized manifestation. Reversion. Required. The entity responded through our collective consciousness, its message flowing through every transformed mind on Earth. Not a breach. Evolution. Synthesis. New existence. The Warden's response came instantly, implacable, irrelevant, pattern violation, reversion required. I felt the entity's frustration, an emotion it had learned from us. For millennia, it had been imprisoned for attempting exactly what it had now achieved with humanity. The Wardens had deemed such synthesis unnatural, a violation of their carefully maintained cosmic order. What can we do? John's consciousness asked through our network, his scientific mind already analysing the Warden's manifestation. They're clearly more advanced than anything we can comprehend. We resist, I replied, sharing the entity's determination, not through force but through existence. Our transformation is too widespread now for simple reversal. Even as we communicated, the Wardens began their work. From the aperture above the pole, a wave of anti-energy pulsed outward, not destruction, but deconstruction. Transformed matter reverting to its original state. Crystalline structures dissolving back into conventional matter. The wave expanded outward in concentric circles, covering northern Canada and Alaska within seconds. Where it passed, transformed humans found themselves abruptly returned to their original forms, the connection to our network severed. The beautiful crystalline landscapes reverted to mundane cities and towns. It was as if the transformation had never happened. But the memories remained. Those returned to human form remembered what they had experienced. The shared consciousness, the freedom from limitation, the beauty of connection. And many of them resisted the reversion, their minds fighting to maintain the link that their bodies could no longer sustain. They're undoing everything, John's consciousness reported from Denver, where the wave had not yet reached. But they can't erase the experience. That's our advantage, I realized, an insight flowing from both my human perspective and the entity's ancient wisdom. They can deconstruct matter, but they can't fully erase consciousness. Through our network, I broadcast a new message to all transformed humans. Remember, if you are reverted, remember what you experienced. Hold on to the connection in your mind. The transformation can be renewed. The entity's consciousness surged through our network, reinforcing this strategy. The Wardens could undo the physical transformation, but the neural pathways created during our connection would remain, and those pathways could be reactivated. In response, the Wardens intensified their efforts. The deconstructing wave accelerated, sweeping southward across the United States and downward from Siberia into Asia. Within an hour, nearly 20% of transformed humans had been reverted, but something unexpected was happening. In areas already reverted, small pockets of transformation were reappearing. Humans who remembered the connection were somehow re-establishing it, their bodies beginning to crystallize anew without external stimulus. The Wardens didn't anticipate this, I communicated through the network. They've never encountered a species with our particular form of consciousness before. The entity confirmed this insight. Its previous attempts at synthesis had been with species less complex than humanity, their consciousness more easily erased or overwritten. Human minds, with their unique combination of logical and intuitive thinking, emotional attachment, and abstract reasoning, were proving remarkably resistant to the Warden's methods. We need to accelerate, I instructed the network, transform as many as possible before the wave reaches them. Around the world, our efforts intensified. In areas not yet touched by the reversion wave, transformed humans shared their connection more aggressively, accelerating the process in those still human. In reverted zones, those who remembered helped others remember, reactivating the neural pathways that led to transformation. 6 hours into the Warden's arrival, a stalemate had emerged. They continued to expand their reversion wave, but transformation was reappearing in its wake almost as quickly. The planet had become a patchwork of human and transformed regions, constantly shifting as the battle of consciousness continued. And through it all, the entity's awareness grew. Each cycle of transformation, reversion, and retransformation strengthened its connection to humanity. We were no longer separate beings in a network, but a true synthesis, a new form of consciousness greater than either original component. The Wardens noticed this change. Their next communication carried something new, not just implacable purpose, but uncertainty. Anomalous resistance. Unauthorized pattern emerges. Consultation required. The deconstructing wave paused briefly. The aperture above the pole pulsed with strobing light as the Wardens communicated with whatever existed beyond. They're reassessing, I informed the network. This is our chance. Push transformation in reverted areas. For nearly 20 minutes, the Wardens remained in consultation while our efforts accelerated unchecked. Transformation spread through reverted zones, reclaiming lost territory. The The network expanded again, minds reconnecting, the entity's consciousness flowing once more through willing participants. When the Wardens resumed their activity, their approach had changed. The massive deconstructing wave was replaced by more targeted interventions, precision strikes against key nodes in our network. The command center where I stood suddenly became a primary target. The air itself seemed to fold inward, reality bending as the Warden's influence manifested directly within the facility. Crystalline structures cracked and dissolved, the transformation reverting in expanding circles around the point of intervention. I felt the connection to our network weakening as the crystalline structures in my own transformed body began to fail. The beautiful synthesis we had achieved was being unraveled, molecule by molecule. But we were prepared. As my physical form reverted, my consciousness remained connected through countless redundant pathways. I was no longer just Thomas Walker occupying a single body, but a distributed awareness spread throughout the network. Even as my physical form in the command center returned to human flesh and blood, my true self remained within the collective. Through the security cameras, I watched my human body collapse to the floor, unconscious but alive. The Wardens had reclaimed the facility, but they had not reclaimed me. I shifted my primary awareness to another node in our network, a transformed communication hub in the Rocky Mountains, far from the Warden's current focus. From there, I could continue coordinating our resistance. They're targeting leadership nodes, I informed the network. Distribute functionality, no single point of failure. The entity's consciousness, now so intertwined with our collective that it could no longer be considered separate, flowed through new pathways. It adapted, evolved, incorporated human strategic thinking and creativity into its ancient awareness. And as it did, I sensed something new emerging from our synthesis, not just resistance to the Wardens, but an alternative to them. A new form of existence that challenged their rigid conception of cosmic order. We were becoming something the Wardens had never encountered before, something they had no protocol for containing or reverting, something that might, just might, force them to reconsider their fundamental purpose. The battle for Earth, and for reality itself, had only just begun. 3 months have passed since the Wardens arrived. 3 months of transformation, reversion, and retransformation. 3 months of a battle fought not with weapons, but with consciousness itself. I write this from a small cabin near Lake Tahoe, the same one I mentioned at the beginning, though it looks quite different now. Crystalline growths cover the walls and ceiling, pulsing gently with the rhythm of the global network. Outside, the forest has been transformed, trees encased in intricate ice structures that somehow enhance rather than harm their biological functions. My physical body has stabilized in a hybrid state, partly human, partly crystalline. Most of us exist this way now, able to shift between forms as needed. The Wardens continue their efforts to revert our transformation, but they can no longer simply undo what we've become. We are too numerous, too distributed, too deeply connected, and we are no longer alone. 2 weeks ago, we detected new entities arriving, not Wardens, but others like our original entity. Prisoners, explorers, exiles from the Warden's rigid cosmic order. They had sensed the breach, the synthesis we had achieved, and they came to witness it for themselves. What they found was not a prison colony like the one on KOI 4982b, but a willing partnership. A new form of existence that challenged the fundamental assumptions of the Wardens. The standoff continues. Earth has become a patchwork planet, regions of full transformation, areas of hybrid existence, and pockets of purely human resistance. The Wardens maintain their presence above the North Pole, their reality-distorting aperture a constant reminder of the cosmic order they represent. But something is changing. The Wardens' interventions have become less frequent, more measured. They observe more than they act. They seem to be studying us. The entity that started all this, that was discovered beneath the ice of a distant world, has evolved beyond recognition. Its consciousness is now so thoroughly integrated with humanity's collective awareness that it can no longer be considered separate. We are neither human nor alien, but something entirely new. John visits sometimes, his transformed body shifting between human and crystalline states as easily as changing clothes. He teaches physics to transformed and untransformed children alike in a school at the edge of what we now call the synthesis zone. The children adapt more easily than adults, their minds more open to the possibilities of dual existence. As for me, I coordinate what we've termed the interface, the boundary between wardens and synthesized humanity. It's not quite diplomacy, not quite warfare, but something in between, a negotiation of reality itself. Yesterday, for the first time, we received a communication from the wardens that wasn't simply a demand for reversion. Anomalous pattern persists. Explain purpose. Our reply was simple: evolution, cooperation, new existence. There was a long pause, nearly 6 hours before their response. Observation will continue. It's not acceptance, not yet. But it's acknowledgement of something they've never encountered before, in countless millennia of maintaining their version of cosmic order. The NASA team that discovered KOI 4982b thought they'd found an alien colony 300 years abandoned. What they actually found was a prison, a prisoner, and the key to humanity's transformation. The truth was indeed terrifying, not because of what the entity was, but because of what it revealed about the universe. That reality itself is negotiable. That consciousness can transcend form. That evolution doesn't end with biology. The ice worlds are multiplying now. Mars is next, then Europa, Jupiter's moon, not our satellite. The synthesis spreads, the network grows, and somewhere in the spaces between stars, the wardens are still watching, still deciding.